We get the results back and it's not there anymore. I do not have cancer anymore. There is nothing there. My story begins in 2013. I had a stage 4 metastatic breast cancer diagnosis. I went through, I think, what's probably pretty typical treatment for that, which is I had chemotherapy, radiation, and a double mastectomy. And then I had a 11-year hiatus because I was cured of cancer by going through that. One thing that happened during that process was I found out that I have the BRCA gene expression. And so I was monitored every 6 to 12 months. And then in 2024, I was diagnosed with paratracheal stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. I was bummed out to the max. And so I went to Cancun. A friend offered me her condo. And I wanted to get myself in a state of because I was so emotionally dysregulated, I wanted to get into a state where I could receive the chemo. So I went to Mexico, hung out for 7 days, watched a lot of sunrises and sunsets, and I did calm down a bit. I also had in the back of my mind, who's gonna be my teacher? For real, I always have teachers in my life, and I'm who am I gonna learn from that will help me during this difficult moment in my life? So anyway, the week ends, I was in Playa del Carmen. I go to Cancun airport to fly home. When I get to the airport in the shuttle, I see someone holding one of those small little white marker boards because they're looking for people. So they were looking for someone by the name of Dr. Joe Dispenza to be dropped off. I know this person, and I had watched What the Bleep Do You Know, and I had read the Placebo book. Back in the day, hadn't really thought about it much for a really, really long time. And I also thought he's also famous. And so maybe I'll see him get him dropped off right here next to me. I was kind of excited about that. I get to the gate and they ask me to come up, and I talk to the person up there and they're like, would you be willing to change seats because someone has a medical condition? Of course. And so I did that, and then I get on the airplane and I realize I'm exhausted. And I remember saying to myself, I need to sleep all the way home. There was something about the airport. I also was really anxious that I didn't quite get in the space I needed to be in to start chemo the next day. And so I'm I'm not gonna talk to the person next to me. I'm gonna sleep. And so I get on the airplane and I see the person, I, give a nod to them and say hi. And I'm putting my luggage up and they're saying something to me were you here for blah, 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 but I couldn't hear what she said. And I'd been to Mexico for events that were music events. So when I put my stuff up, sat back down, I said to her, were you here for a music event? And then she said something oh, you probably wouldn't know what I was here for or something like that. And I'm no, tell me. And she's oh, I'm just finishing a 10-day advanced retreat with Joe Dispenza. And I'm okay, seriously, it was I'm well, let me tell you, I just knew, that's source, right? I'd forgotten about him. I saw his name, I got to the airport, forgot. And now my seat has been changed so I can sit next to this woman. It was just really cool to understand what was happening here. And so I told her, I have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. I'm going to go home and start chemo the next day. And so she started to tell me about the work. And I don't know how many hours long. I was probably time traveling, but that flight was 5, 6. We talked the whole time. During that time, she introduced me to some of his meditations, and there was no way for me to listen to. I didn't have his meditations downloaded. I hadn't even thought about him in a decade. And so she let me use her headphones, and she was an angel, and she was wonderful. We live in different states, but we exchange texts, and I got home, started chemo the next day, and I started meditating. And I dug in, like I went in, I immersed myself. I literally thought about that, like I'm going to immerse myself in this. And so I was doing the meditations every day, once or twice. And then I also found like Dr. Joe on podcasts, which I love because I felt like the podcasters were like asking him questions I had. And so I was learning a lot there. And then I also watched The Source. I also, funny enough, now that I'm at a retreat, we're required to go through the progressive course. I did that on my own, even before I knew I was going to a retreat. So I did that. I did the Dr. Joe Lives, which I just loved because there's a whole library there. And also, again, questions are coming from the community, and I have those questions. So it's just self-learning. If I was cooking in the kitchen, which I spend a lot of time doing, I would have something on. I'd be listening to something. I started listening to one of his books was called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And that book resonated with me like 100%. I started to decide that the first thing I had to do was calm my nervous system. And I was learning from what I was reading and listening and learning from was that I needed to develop consciousness. And so I just decided, for the ways I've been thinking about the past and future nonstop, that I would start catching that. And I had heard on one of his podcasts where Dr. Joe was interviewed that he said to use the word change, which I really like, because I probably would have used like a negative word like no. And what I realized was these thoughts, it was like, I don't know, every second, it was just so much like to catch it. But that's consciousness. I just need to catch it. And so it was so much in the beginning that I realized I would write down the date because I kind of like a little reward system. And every time I caught these thoughts, I would put a heart down. And, in the beginning, we had a lot of hearts. But what was cool about that was I actually looked at that as a victory because each one of those hearts, that's consciousness. So now I'm starting to be conscious of these thoughts. And then I would say change and I'd think about anything else. I started to feel better. I started to feel a little happier. I could wake up, not necessarily going into the past or future, and actually wake up. And also there's just like things in his morning and evening meditation where he's like little things that really mattered to me, and the state that I was in was like, it's a new day. He says it like that. And he's like, he says something about like, don't forget to smile today. And I was just like, that mattered so much for my heart. And so I just started to feel better and better. And then it started to come up in meditations that I had been living my life as a victim, like a victim of cancer, a victim of, different things that happened in my life, and that I was engaging with my community, my close circle of friends as a victim. It's such a setup in some ways, cancer diagnosis, oh, poor me, or going into the medical center all of the time. And they're like, tell me about, everything that's going wrong with you as a result of chemo. They want to check in on what's going on. And so I just decided to change that with friends and change that when I would go into the cancer center. And I was just like, I know there's this long list of symptoms. Can you trust me to know my body, and I'll tell you if something's up, because I just didn't want to put my energy constantly on, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? And I really feel like this time with chemo that I have far less symptoms that feel difficult. It's almost like, I'm not giving them my attention. 3 months passes, and so that was 3 months. I make it sound like it was a short amount of time, but that was 3 months. And I was just dedicated to doing this work, not only every day, but kind of all the time. And so I went back and I had my PET and CT scan, and we get the results back, and it's not there anymore. Like in my paratracheal lymph node, I do not have cancer anymore. There is nothing there. I am so grateful for this work because it saved my life, and I'm happier. Like one of the things I have learned now, from what I've read and from being here, is it's like I just need to create a life that I love, and I'm starting to create a life that I love. I remember at one point looking myself in the mirror. I used to hear about people like looking at the mirror and saying something like, "I like you," and I'm like, No, and I wasn't even planning on doing it, but one day in this process, like I looked in the mirror and I'm like, I really love you. And so I'm grateful, and I will continue to do this work always.